We'll now move to question time and call Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, the Cost of Living Committee held more than 20 hearings across Australia. It received more than 1,500 submissions and responses to the community survey throughout its inquiry into the cost of living crisis. The overwhelming evidence is that Australians are poorer than they were 2.5 years ago, and we are in a national cost of living crisis. Will the government adopt the Cost of Living Committee's recommendation to convene the National Cabinet to address the excessive government spending that is keeping interest rates higher for longer?
Order across the chamber. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Hume for the question. And she would know that the government doesn't require a Senate committee to understand the extent of the cost of living challenges facing Australians. And in fact, the Finance Minister, the Treasurer, the Minister for Health, all Cabinet Ministers and the Prime Minister, first and foremost, have been focused on what it is that we could do as a government to assist Australians when it comes to cost of living. And that's why you have seen, under this government, more people in jobs, more people earning more and keeping more of what they earn with our tax plan. And I would remind those opposite that we have seen more than 1 million jobs created. We have seen near-record number of women in jobs and women working full-time. We have real wages grown more in the past 12 months alone than they did in the entire decade of the former coalition government. The smallest gender pay gap on record.
Order.
And, of course, the tax of living measures that the government has put in place in order to make a contribution to the challenges Australian families are facing. Bigger tax cuts for every working Australian, cheaper childcare, energy rebates, student debt relief, free TAFE, more bulk bill GP appointments, cheaper medicines, the largest increase to rent assistance in 30 years and the largest investment in social and affordable housing in more than a decade, as well as a fair go at the checkout and a crackdown on dodgy deals and tackling excessive surcharges on cards. And, of course, what I'd be interested in is whether Senator Hume brought forward to that committee the evidence of what it would be like if she had had her way, the evidence of what it would be like if she and her colleagues had had it their way, if Senator Hume had had it their way, because we would know that Australians would be paying higher taxes. We know, that Australians—
The time for answering has expired. Just a moment, Senator Hume. Senator Cash, if you withdraw those interjections you made earlier in relation to Senator Wong about Senator Cash, we're not here to
If I would withdraw.
Thank you. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Madam President, the committee's final report found that Labor's anti-productivity red tape agenda is contributing to the cost of living crisis, driving up costs for small businesses and prices for consumers. Will your government adopt the Cost of Living Committee's recommendation to convene the National Cabinet to develop productivity-enhancing reforms to the economy, including establishing a national deregulation agenda?
Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Hume, I think that the difficulty with you putting a proposition to us and to the Australian people that somehow you would have a different outcome on cost of living really ask people to ignore the fact that you have voted against all of the government's cost of living measures.
That's right.
And I know you want to try and shift the conversation because you now want another committee. You want to have a discussion about what we do. But when you were tested, Senator, you and your colleagues made very clear that actually cost of living is not your priority. There is no other way to explain the way in which you voted in this chamber. And now you might be desperate to come up with an agenda that you can say to Australians, well, look, actually, we're going to have this committee and it's going to talk about this, and we're going to do all of these things, but please forget about the fact we voted against energy price relief. Yeah. Please forget about the fact that we voted against cheaper medicines. And please forget about the fact that we don't actually think your wages should.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Australia is in a cost of living crisis that requires an immediate response to get core inflation sustainably under control, as the RBA says it requires. You've had 2.5 years. How can it be that this government is already out of ideas on how to sustainably lower inflation and fight the cost of living for all Australians that doesn't simply involve spending more money or creating more red tape?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Wong.
What I would just remind those opposite, well, I'll just make a few points. We know that that we have seen inflation increased over a period of time prior to us coming to office, and we know that this government has had to work to try and work to bring down inflation. Now, I would make the point that when we came to office, inflation was higher and rising, and now it is lower and falling. I would make the point that inflation was 6.1% at the time of the election, and is now 2.8%. It is less than half of what we inherited and about a third of its peak.
Order.
Now, you are right, Senator. Inflation remains a key challenge and one that this government is focused on. You are wrong in pointing to your own record as one that is anything to be proud of.
Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. How has the Albanese Labor government worked to help Australians during the worldwide inflation surge? And how is the government cleaning up the mess left by the Liberals and Nationals' reckless budget management and failure to plan for the future? What cost of living measures has the government introduced to support Australians? And how is the government supporting Australians in other ways, including promoting higher wages, stronger rights for workers and bringing costs down for households?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Wong.
And my thanks to Senator Walsh for that question. And I might start by making a point about jobs and wages. As I said in response to Senator Hume, we've seen since we were elected more than 1 million jobs created. It's the first time any government has seen the creation of 1 million new jobs in a parliamentary term. We've seen near record number of women in jobs and the smallest gender pay gap on record. We've seen real wages having grown more in the past 12 months alone than they did during the entire decade of the former coalition government. So, look, real wages growing under us, under them, not so much. And in fact, we all remember Senator Cormann. Actually, the inside voice came out when he talked about what the coalition's real plan was, and that is lower wages are a deliberate design feature of their economic plan. Now, in terms of inflation, absolutely, we understand the challenge inflation places on an economy and on families, on an economy and on people. And that is why we have worked hard through the budget process, both to put downward pressure on inflation but also to deliver cost of living relief. And I would again make this point, that inflation is much less than half of what we inherited and around a third of its peak. Senator Walsh also talked about cost of living support, and she's part of a government that has delivered bigger tax cuts for Australians, a tax cut for every Australian worker. Senator Walsh knows a lot about early childhood education and the people who work in that sector, and Senator Walsh would know, and Labor senators know, and workers know that we are delivering increases for childcare workers at the same early childhood educators at the same time as delivering cheaper childcare. We have delivered energy rebates, and people will remember in this chamber those opposite voting against energy price relief for Australian families.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
I note that under the Albanese Labor government's careful economic management, inflation has halved. How is the government tackling inflation, getting it back to where it should be, while also bringing costs down for households, improving wages and providing cost of living support to all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Wong.
Thank you. It is true, President, that we have faced, the world has faced, real challenges, the economic aftershocks of the pandemic and the ongoing effects of conflict around the world. We've seen disrupted supply chains, shortages in critical skills, a worldwide surge in inflation and in energy prices. And we in Australia have made good progress. Of course we want to do more. Of course we want to do more. But inflation has more than halved under our watch. As I said, it had a 6 in front of it when we came to office. Now it has a 2. And it is back in the target range, the target band, for the first time since 2021. But importantly, what we want to see is inflation coming down, wages going back up, and the gender pay gap closing. And we are seeing all of those things trending in the right direction. And that is a good thing for Australian workers. That is a good thing for Australian families, and it is a good thing for the economy.
Has expired. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you. The Albanese Labor government has introduced cost of living relief, from tax cuts to cheaper childcare and cheaper medicines. Minister, what reasons have Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals given for not supporting cost of living relief policies which help every single Australian?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Walsh knows that we have been working to improve the lives of Australians with cost of living relief, and we also all know that Mr Dutton opposed it. Opposed all of it. He opposed the tax cut for Australians. He opposed every cost of living measure. And what we know on Medicare is that he opposed cheaper medicines, and I assume will continue to oppose the extension of bulk billing. And if you really want to know what Mr Dutton is like, you only have to look at his record when he was health minister. When he was health minister, you might want to shout, but what we know is he is the worst health minister that Australia has ever seen. The health minister who wanted a GP tax, a tax on going to the GP. You're led by a man who wanted to tax people for going to the doctor, and now you want to come in here and tell us all that you're the friend of working people. And give us a break.
Minister, order. Senator Ruston, when I call your name, I expect you to come to order, not continue to yell across the chamber. Senator McGrath.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. The recent COSBOA Small Business Perspective report released last month shows the biggest pressures for small and medium enterprises are rising energy costs, the increased cost of doing business, increased cost of goods due to inflation and impacts of rate rises on mortgage costs and rents. Minister, the Albanese Labor government promised to fix most of these concerns prior to the last election. You promised to reduce energy bills by $275, deliver cheaper mortgages and claimed Australians would notice what a change of government would feel like in their wallet. Instead, interest rates remain at record highs despite cuts in most comparable global economies. Inflation remains sticky, energy bills continue to skyrocket, and as a result, business insolvencies are now at record highs. Minister, will your government take responsibility for any of these broken promises?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Minister Wong.
The government always takes responsibility for ensuring we steer Australia through economic challenges, and that's what we have done, and that is what we are doing. And I remind Senator McGrath that when we came to government, inflation was at 6.1% and it was rising, and now it is at 2.8% and is falling, and it is less than half of what we inherited and a third of its peak. So that's the first point. The second point in relation to energy price relief, as I recall, Senator McGrath, you were amongst those who voted against it.
That's right.
So to come in here and say that small businesses are very worried about energy bill relief after you voted against providing them with energy bill relief seems a very odd political position. It's a very odd political position. Look, small businesses are the engine room of the Australian economy, and they are at the heart of local communities across the country, and they employ some 5 million people and contribute $500 billion to our economy. That is why we do have to ensure that we deliver for small business and help them bounce back from challenges and improve their long-term resilience. The most recent budget provided more than $640 million in practical and targeted support for small business. We are giving the government government policy is to give a tax cut through the $20,000 instant asset write-off, something that I think originally there was some dispute about on the other side about whether they were going to support it, but I'm pleased that on this one occasion they actually did the right thing. We've abolished a number of nuisance tariffs and the largest unilateral tariff reform in 2 decades, and we have updated the Commonwealth procurement rules, with small businesses getting a bigger slice of the $75 billion in contracts the Australian government spends each year, with a 40% target for contracts up to $20 million and a 25% target on contracts up to $1 billion in value.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McGrath, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, recent research from Roy Morgan found that 1.9 million homeowners are at risk of mortgage stress, increasing by 852,000 since you came to government. The average owner-occupier mortgage has now risen to $634,479, a 9.3% increase from 2023. Can you explain how these figures represent the cheaper mortgages the Prime Minister promised to voters prior to the last election?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, I think there are 3 sort of economic points in relation to that. The first is inflation, and I've responded to that on a number of occasions. The second is wages. And unlike you, we see that we have more people entering the workforce. We have more people who are able to keep more of what they earn because of our tax cuts. And, of course, we have wages growing in a way they did not grow under you. Now, the third point is obviously housing supply. We know that housing affordability and the difficulty with housing affordability is in great part being driven by a lack of housing supply. So in all 3 of these, you see 3 of these domains of economic policy, you see the government acting and the coalition doing what you would anticipate, which is opposing. So, Senator, it is the case that many people are struggling to make ends meet. It is the case that many people are struggling when it comes to mortgages.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McGrath, second supplementary.
Thank you. In his 2022 victory speech, the Prime Minister stated that, "I can promise all Australians this. No matter how you voted today, the government I lead will respect every one of you every day." How can the Prime Minister possibly claim to have kept his promise to respect Australians when he has failed to deliver on any of the numerous promises he made prior to the last election, like delivering cheaper mortgages or reducing energy bills by $275?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Minister Wong.
The disrespect, actually, Senator, is to vote against assistance to Australians and then come in and play politics with the fact that Australians are doing it tough. I mean, that is what the game plan is, and I know there's a lot of arrogance on the other side. Mr. Dutton, we know he's a very arrogant man. But I think if you're serious about helping in these jobs, if you're serious about trying to help people with the work that you're doing, then surely you should be trying to deliver the sort of relief that the government is. It is the case. We understand how tough people are doing it. That is why we have worked hard to deliver cost-of-living relief, while we are working hard to bring inflation down, and while we are working hard to ensure wages continue to increase. I just make the point. Those on the other side oppose cost-of-living relief and oppose
Thank you, Minister.
wages.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Environment Minister, Senator McAllister. One of the greatest threats to endangered Australian wildlife, like the koala and the swift parrot, is the destruction of their habitat. Yet the majority—
Senator Hanson-Young, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Order. 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 I'm waiting for quiet. Order. Senator McKim, that applies to you when I call order. Senator Hanson-Young, I'm going to invite you to begin your question again, and I'm going to ask for the clock to be reset. So please begin again.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Environment Minister, Senator McAllister. One of the greatest threats to endangered Australian wildlife, like the koala and the swift parrot, is the destruction of their habitat. Yet the majority of deforestation in Australia is not assessed by our federal environment laws. Why does the logging industry get an exemption that not even the miners get?
Senator Cash, order. Order. Senator McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. And the senator asks about the approach that this government takes to environment protection. The senator, in fact, knows the answer to this question already, which is that the Australian government has embarked on a program of law reform to improve the laws which govern the way that environment issues are managed in this country. And in fact, we did that on the basis of a report that was commissioned by the previous government and delivered by Professor Samuel, who recommended wide-ranging changes to Australia's environment laws. Now, at this point in time, Senator, the second tranche of legislation to implement those policy reforms is before this chamber. And, in fact, it is open to the Greens to vote for that legislation, to vote for legislation that would put a tough cop on the beat, to vote for legislation that would increase penalties. And it is surprising to me that the Greens political party continue to insist that they do not intend to vote for this legislation at all. That despite going to the electorate and saying that you're the people who want to see reform, you're indicating that you don't want to see a new Environment Protection Authority, a national authority established.
Senator McKim.
Senator McKim interjects and he asks about the approach to native forestry.
Order.
What I indicated to you earlier in my comment, Senator, is that the program of reform that the government's embarked upon is comprehensive. And as part of that reform, we have publicly indicated, we have made it very clear that native forest logging will be regulated by national environment laws for the first time ever through a national environment standard. And the question for you is whether or not you're in the cart for this reform.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hatching-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Samuel report clearly said that the exemption for the regional forest agreements should be removed. It should be removed. Previously, the Labor government has said they would do this. I want to know, will you get it done while you can in this term of government?
Thank you, Senator Hatching-Young. Minister McAllister.
Well, as I indicated in my answer to your primary question, Senator, we have legislation before this parliament to implement our proposed laws, our proposed nature-positive laws. And your party has publicly indicated that you do not intend to vote for them. Now, it's up to you to explain to the Australian public why that's the case, why it is that you won't vote for legislation that establishes stronger penalties, that establishes stronger compliance arrangements, and that has been asked for and supported by Australian environmental groups as well as Australian businesses. Because the actual truth
Minister McAllister, please resume your seat. Senator McKim, I've called you at least 4 times. Your constant interjections are rude and disrespectful and disorderly. You will listen in silence or you can leave the chamber. That's your choice. Minister McAllister, please continue.
Thanks, President. And as I was indicating to the Senate, we have a comprehensive program of reform in place. We have legislation before the Senate that has been provided support by environment stakeholders, by business stakeholders, and the actual truth is that the current laws actually are not working in the way that we need them to. They're not protecting the environment adequately, and we need reform. And the question is why the Greens
time for
won't
answering
get
has
involved.
expired. Senator Hanson-Young, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. It's extraordinary how many words need to be said to try and avoid using the word forests. If these logging loopholes aren't closed and Australia continues to be the global deforestation hotspot, how on earth does the government expect to stop extinction of our wildlife?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister McAllister.
It can be at times difficult to answer a question which is entirely unresponsive to the information that's already been provided. So I will go back to the original information that I gave you, Senator, which is this. As part of our Nature Positive plan, we have said that native forest logging will be regulated under national environment laws for the first time ever through national environment standards. We have put this proposition forward and we have sought support in this chamber for the reform package. Tranche 2 is in front of you. And you have yet to explain why you won't vote for those laws which improve penalties, laws which improve information gathering powers, laws which establish a better architecture to police environment laws, and let us
Minister McAllister, please resume your seat. Senator McKim, please take up my invitation to either cease your interjections or leave the chamber. Minister McAllister, please continue.
I understand that we are approaching an election and this is a favourite area for the Greens, but the actual truth is that they can't escape, is that there are environment laws before this chamber that you are—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Since we last met, the Albanese Labor government has continued to focus on cost-of-living relief for all Australians. In addition to the announcement in August that we would wipe $3 billion off student debt, the government has now gone further, wiping a further 20% off all student loans for 3 million Australians and cutting debt repayment rates. Minister, why has the government taken this approach, and how will it assist people who have student debts with the cost of living?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Sheldon for this really important question and for highlighting the work that's been done since we last sat to look at ways that we can continue to roll out effective and responsible cost of living relief, but also some support for young people in this country, particularly as we know we need more and more of them to go to university, to go to TAFE, to make sure they can secure the job opportunities of the future, and also so Australia can secure our economic opportunities ahead. As our leader has said this afternoon, the Labor government wants Australians to earn more and keep more of what they earn and not pay more than you should. And so we've been really focused on ways that we can assist Australians with student debt, often younger Australians. And we did that in the budget by initially dealing with that indexation challenge that we had, which would wipe $3 billion off student debt and put in place a long-term lasting reform around the indexation rate that applies to people with student debts. By cutting the debt and increasing the repayment thresholds, which is part of this new announcement, we're freeing up money for other costs that young people face, like moving out of home, furnishing a home, buying a car or saving a deposit for a home. Our policy cuts a further 20% off all students' loans, which will benefit around 3 million Australians. This represents around $16 billion in cuts, reducing the debt burden for Australians with a student loan. For someone with the average help debt of $27,600, they will see around $5,520 wiped from that debt from next year. In August, we introduced a bill to cap the help indexation rate to be the lower of CPI or the WPI index and impose that retrospectively.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Minister, it is clear Labor's help debt policy will make life easier for 3 million Australians, particularly young Australians. How is the government supporting the rest of the community with cost of living relief, and can the minister outline progress made to tackle inflation?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Sheldon for the supplementary, because these are the key priorities that we've been working on since coming to government. And as again Senator Wong outlined in answers to questions earlier, we inherited an inflation challenge that was increasing. It was about 6.1%. It peaked at 7.8% at the end of that calendar year, and we have been getting it down. Absolutely focused on how do we bring inflation down in a way that supports households who are doing it tough. And that's why we've been looking at those initiatives like energy bill relief, like investments in childcare, like free TAFE, like more money going into Medicare, all of these areas where investments are felt at the hip pocket but don't add to the inflation challenge that we've been trying to manage. So getting costs down, getting wages moving, getting inflation back to where it should be, that has been a key focus of our economic plan. The data that we're seeing in relation to inflation is very promising.
Has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Minister, what challenges has the government faced in delivering cost-of-living relief to all Australians, and how can the Senate work together to ensure that people with student debt can get some relief?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Senator Sheldon. And as we'll see in the next week or so, the Senate could support the reforms that are before the parliament. We've got important reforms, not only to indexation arrangements, but also to implementing aspects of the universities accord. We want to make sure our vocational education and training system, our higher education system more broadly, is geared and supported and invested in by this government to make sure that people have the choices going forward, whether they want to take up a trade, they want to get a certificate, whether they want to enrol in a bachelor's degree or even a further degree beyond that. Then we are about investing in that system and making it easier for people to take up those choices. We will remain focused on that, but certainly one thing the Senate could do is support the government and not oppose all the measures, as those opposite has consistently done for the last 2.5 years.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator McAllister. During Senate estimates on the 5th of November, the age assurance verification trial and social media age verification proposals were examined. For those that missed it, let me see if I have this correct. The system the government is considering will require two things. Firstly, a digital ID to access social media for all users. And then, to make sure nobody is using a dodgy digital ID, age verification assurance technology will scan the user's face, monitor their keystrokes for content and technique, and calculate their age. If it finds the person might be underage, it will compare back to the biometric data in the person's digital ID, check their identity and date of birth. Is that an accurate, concise explanation of the system being examined?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
No. I suppose I could sit down. Perhaps I'll just no, Senator Roberts, that is not accurate.
Misinformation, Malcolm.
But we are obviously engaged in an important policy reform process to protect children from some of the harms that they are exposed to on social media. And I would be really surprised, Senator Roberts, if you didn't hear about this amongst the people that you talk to in your constituency. I think every senator in this place has had a conversation with a parent or perhaps with a teacher who is concerned about the kind of information that children are seeing online, accessing online, and the inability of parents to actually engage and protect their children from some of those harms. We want Australian parents to actually know that we've got their backs. That is the underlying motivation for embarking on the reform. It's actually, of course, about protecting kids. We still want them to be connected. We don't want to punish children. We don't want to isolate them, but we do want them to operate in an environment that is safe. And that's the reason that we have committed to bringing forward legislation for a minimum age limit for social media this fortnight. We have worked with a pretty wide range of stakeholders, Senator, and we're very grateful for the support that we've received in doing this work. Obviously, the National Cabinet has taken a very strong interest in this, and First Ministers in that forum have agreed that the Commonwealth will legislate a minimum age of 16. I think one of the implications of your question and the way that you framed it was a concern around privacy, and that's a legitimate question to ask, Senator. We will not put at risk the personal information of Australians, and the regulations will include robust privacy protections for personal information.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. I predicted during the digital ID debate that one person could sign a younger person into the social media, and the only solution is keeping the device camera on permanently. an outrageous breach of trust and privacy. While you're peeping into the camera feed of all social media users, hackers will have an easy hack to spy on families in their bedrooms, to learn daily routines and work out when the home can be safely burgled. Minister, in the name of supposedly keeping children safe, are you building a surveillance apparatus for perverts and thieves?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
No.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The government's solution still requires the camera to be permanently on. There will be continuous surveillance of the computer user in their own home by the government. What if a parent has a child on the knee watching a children's video or a cooking video on social media? Will the system lock them out because the child is under 16? Minister, in your brave new world of internet regulation, do parents have any rights over their children's lives, or is the Albanese government cancelling parents?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister McAllister.
President, almost nothing in the set of propositions put forward by Senator Roberts in his question to me accurate, true, or based in anything that has been said publicly by the minister or anyone in the government. And I want to make that very, very clear. Our focus is, in fact, on protecting children, on protecting them from an environment that has not been designed to secure their safety. And the reason that we know that is because we hear that all the time from the parents that speak to us. Our interest, in fact, is creating an environment that is supportive of parents who are trying to engage in a constructive way in dealing with the information that their children are exposed to. Our interest is in supporting those parents who say, we wish to do better in terms of the harms our kids are experiencing, but we don't have the tools. And that is the focus
Thank you,
of our
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, super funds like CBUS and Australian Super are facing significant regulatory fines. Does the Albanese government support these super funds passing on these costs to their members in the form of additional charges?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President, and I thank Senator Bragg for the question. The government is a strong supporter of the regulators and the regulatory system that has been put in place to make sure that where there are issues of concern or where there are issues that the regulators identify as issues of concern, they should take action. And that's what we're seeing happen with some of the cases that Senator Bragg has been following, and I think he alludes to in his question. So the government supports the regulatory system that's been put in place. We support having strong independent regulators like ASIC and APRA, and also support them being able to do their job without political interference. That would be the government's position. We have a strong superannuation system. It's done a great job in terms of ensuring that members are accumulating funds for their retirement. We want to make sure that members of those funds and those funds always act in the members' interests, and the superannuation industry scheme legislation, I think, is pretty specific about that, and that's why we have APRA and ASIC doing the work that they need to do. So making sure that the superannuation system works in the interests of members, there's transparency around that, and where there are problems, that those problems are investigated and responded to by the regulators, is the system that the government supports.
Senator Bragg, first supplementary.
Thanks very much. Minister, how is it reasonable for these super funds to pay unions, but the same shareholder unions can avoid paying fines?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. I didn't hear the first bit of the question, just the second bit.
I'll invite Senator Bragg to restate the question. Thank you, Senator Bragg.
It's not very complicated. The question is—
Senator Bragg, there's no need for commentary. Just repeat the question.
I wasn't trying to editorialise. All I was saying was how is it reasonable for these super funds to pay the union movement, but the same shareholder unions that own the funds not pay regulatory fines?
Well, why didn't they use— Thank you, Senator Bragg. Order. Order. Senator Scarr, order. Order. And Senator Watt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I think I've answered this in the original question. There are regulators that enforce the legislation that governs the superannuation industry. The rules and laws need to be abided by. The regulators need to, respond, and where they find misconduct or inappropriate conduct, they have a range of penalties available to them. This parliament has set the regulatory arrangements for the superannuation industry. We are always looking at ways to strengthen superannuation in this country. Those opposite are always looking to destroy it. Senator Bragg himself never misses an opportunity to talk down superannuation. They won't be happy until every person in Australia has had access to their super funds before retirement to raise the level of housing prices in this country.
Thank you. Senator Bragg, second supplementary.
Thanks very much. Does the Albanese government, therefore, have any plan to step in to protect members of the super funds, or does the government endorse super funds paying unions but not their insurance claims?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
I've answered this question in the original answer. The government supports a strongly regulated superannuation system for all superannuation entities. There are rules in place, rules that have been determined by this chamber, and those rules need to be enforced. And if there are any concerns, if there are any findings that are inappropriate, then the penalties should be imposed. But Labor will always support the superannuation system. We invest in it, we value it, we think it's good for working people, and you will always seek to undermine it.
Order. Order. I invite those senators who have so much to say via their interjections to make their comments at some other time, not at question time. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Education. Minister, student debt is crushing millions of people, shackling them in a lifetime of debt, blocking people out of getting their first home, making it harder to make ends meet, causing people to delay having families, and even crushing their dream of going to uni. After years of relentless pressure, Labor is adopting parts of Green's policy to start to cancel some student debt. But what are you waiting for? Why are you dangling your pledge to cancel 20% of student debt as an election bribe? Minister, will you commit to introducing legislation this week to lock in your government's pledge on cancelling 20% of student debt and increasing the repayment threshold?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Faruqi, for highlighting yet another commitment of the Albanese Labor government to do something about the cost of living pressure that Australians are facing. We've had questions before from Senator Hodgins-May about the early childhood education and care payments that it took a Labor government to provide, and I appreciate you highlighting the commitment from a Labor government to deliver a reduction on student debt. This is a very important change that it took a Labor government to provide, not a Greens government, because that will never exist, not a coalition government, that's for sure, because they are about loading up student debt, but it took a Labor government to actually commit to cut a further 20% off all student loan debts, which will wipe around $16 billion in debt for around 3 million Australians. Now, of course, that comes on top of the measures that we announced in this year's budget to change the indexation rate for students who had taken out significant debts that grew exponentially under a coalition government. And again, it took a federal Labor government, the Albanese Labor government, to actually make the changes necessary to relieve that kind of pressure on students. So I'm very proud of the fact that it was the Albanese Labor government that has now made a commitment to cut a 20% off all student loan debts. And what that means for students with a debt of about $20,000 to $30,000 is a reduction of $4,000 to $6,000 off their debt. For students with a debt of $30,000 to $40,000, that's a reduction of $6,000 to $8,000 off their debt. For students with debts of $50,000 to $60,000, which is about 147,500 Australians, a reduction of $10,000 to $12,000. Now, we've also heard over the last week the Coalition oppose this policy because they want students to have it even harder when they're trying to save up for house deposits. They want life to get harder for Australians, whether they're students, workers or anyone else.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Faruqi, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Well, the question was about when and not what. But, Minister, people need certainty on student debt relief right now. The vast majority of people burdened with student debt are young people and women, who also bear the brunt of the housing and the rental crisis and the cost of living crisis. In the absence of any government legislation, will you support Greens' amendments to the Uni Accord Bill to lock in your pledge to cancel 20% of student debt and give people certainty right now, not next year, not after the election?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Watt.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where, for the Greens Party of Australia, undeterred from their recent shellackings in the Queensland and ACT elections, have decided to double down on their policies and continue obstructing Labor as we attempt to deliver real improvements for students, for workers, for people looking for housing. Now, Senator Faruqi included in her question the point that Australians are struggling to deal with lack of housing. Yes, they are. Now, I wonder if there's someone in this chamber who could do something about that. Yes, there is. Their party name is a colour. Work out who that is. It's the Greens Party who could be doing something to help Australians struggling with housing by voting for our Help to Buy legislation. It's the Greens Party who could be doing something to relieve student debt by voting for Labor's legislation around student debt. But instead of that, all you do is obstruct and ask questions about things that you'll never actually deliver.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, people are being tired of being used as pawns in political games being played by your lives by Labor. You have a chance to show right now. That Labor cares about people being crushed by student debt. Why won't you? Why won't you stop playing political games and actually legislate? Legislate right now. Yeah, you can laugh. You don't care about people.
Order. Order. I'm going to wait for the chamber to come to order before I call the minister. Order. Senator McKim. Minister Watt.
Well, I really have seen it all. A Greens Party senator asking questions about political games. Really? Really? The party who thrives on grandstanding, the party who will take any stage to grandstand, even if that's to line up with disgraced leaders of the CFMEU, that's how much you will grandstand, now want to come in here and lecture other people about political games and using people as pawns. For many, many months now, the Labor Party has had legislation in this chamber to literally help Australians to buy their own homes, help to buy. And what has the Greens Party done? They've stood in the way and joined up with Peter Dutton and the Coalition to block that going ahead. Please don't give us a lecture about political games. Now, we know that not all the Greens Party think that way. Senator Faruqi was giving voice to the extreme faction of the Greens Party that wants to block everything that Labor tries to do. We know there are other Greens who don't support that kind of approach and actually want to get things done. Maybe they'll eventually get something done and back in Labor when we're doing something.
Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Skills and Training, Senator Watt. Cost of living is front of mind for all Australians, and we know that the cost of courses is often a significant barrier to studying for many existing and aspiring students. Over the next decade, 9 out of 10 new jobs will require post-secondary qualifications, and almost half of them will come through a VET pathway. I note that Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals oversaw a chronic skills deficit, and they believe that investment in TAFE is just wasteful spending. How is the Labor government continuing to prioritise skills and training and removing the cost barriers for Australian students? What are the key challenges to delivering this support to Australian students?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Grogan, who I know is a very strong supporter of TAFE and the free TAFE program that our government is putting forward. Now, the Albanese Labor government knows that Australians are doing it tough right now, and that's why our economic plan is all about helping people with their cost of living while also driving down inflation. And a key part of our cost of living support is helping more Australians access high-quality training for free so that they can get secure, well-paid jobs. And that's what the Albanese government's Free TAFE Places agenda is all about. Our Free TAFE initiative is bringing down the costs of getting a qualification, saving students money and helping them into better paid jobs. Working with the states and territories, our government's Free TAFE initiative is also making immediate inroads to addressing the skill shortages faced by Australian employers. The enormous uptake of enrolments in its first 18 months demonstrates what a critical difference Free TAFE makes to Australians looking to undertake training. Since Free TAFE started in January 2023, there have been more than 508,000 enrolments in courses in priority areas, including construction, early education, digital technology and care. And importantly, 1 in every 3 places has been taken up by people in regional communities, and 6 in every 10 enrolments have been women. And we are hearing the sneering coming from the other side of the chamber about the idea that Australians would get free TAFE courses to help them into a better job. And given the significant benefit the program is providing to women in regional towns, you might be surprised to hear what the Deputy Liberal leader and member for Farrer said about free TAFE. She called it wasteful spending. How arrogant! How arrogant! They sneer at regional Australians trying to get ahead. They sneer at women trying to seek to re-enter the workforce by getting a free TAFE place that is being provided by the Albanese Labor government.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Grogan, second supplementary. First supplementary.
Thank you, President. On this side of the chamber, we know that vocational education and training plays a crucial role in addressing skills shortages in critical areas like construction. Can the minister outline how the Albanese Labor government investment in free TAFE will support more Australians to pursue careers in construction?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. I can, Senator Grogan. Under our government, we're helping more tradies get the qualifications they need to build more homes, and we're helping them get those qualifications for free. Oh, Senator Henderson scoffs. Was that a scoff or a sneer? I'm not quite sure what that was. The idea, it was a sneer, wasn't it? A sneer at the idea that we would help people get into construction trades through free TAFE courses. More than 35,000 Australians are doing free construction courses through our free TAFE policy in the program's first 18 months. Last week, our government made announcements with the Western Australian and South Australian governments that will make more free TAFE places available in construction and housing courses. Because if we want to build more homes, we need more boots on the ground. And under an arrogant Peter Dutton, we won't sneer at young Australians seeking a—
Senator Watt, 1, you need to refer to those in the other place by their correct titles, and 2, withdraw the comment.
I withdraw.
Thank you.
Under an arrogant Mr Dutton.
No, because you are reflecting on his character.
Okay. We won't sneer at young Australians seeking a qualification in construction and calling it wasteful spending. We will deliver that support to people who need it.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, we have an ageing population and there's an increasing demand for care and support services across the country. How does free TAFE support the development of a skilled and resilient workforce in the care sector, and what are the key barriers to meeting our workforce needs?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Grogan, free TAFE is helping train more carers to look after our loved ones, whether they be young or old. Over the past 18 months, the most enrolled free TAFE courses were in early childhood education, individual support and nursing. In fact, there have been over 130,000 new enrolments in aged care and disability care courses. That's 130,000 Australians getting the skills they need for free because of the Albanese Labor government. We need to grow the next generation of high-quality health and aged care workers, and removing cost barriers with free TAFE will continue to attract students into care industries which still need more workers. For example, in Queensland, a student enrolled in a Diploma of Nursing course would save almost $16,000 under our free TAFE place policy. Christy is one of those students training at the Logan Lee campus, and she says that free TAFE is a huge help. The financial support has allowed me to focus on my studies without worrying about tuition costs.
Thank you, Minister.
What free TAFE is doing for
Has
Australians.
expired. Senator Kovacic.
My question is
Sorry, Senator Wong.
President, I wonder if you could take some time, post-question time, to reconsider your ruling on the use of the word arrogant. What I would make my submission to you would be that that is a word that has been used quite regularly in this place, and asking Senator Watt to withdraw arrogant in relation to Mr Dutton probably is not consistent with precedent. I know that Senator McGrath might not agree with Senator Watt, but that's a different issue. But I wonder if you could consider that and perhaps respond later in the day or tomorrow.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I will do that. Senator Kovacic.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. The Health Department has revealed that your government has put a cap on the number of medicines that can be considered for listing on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. This is the first time in history that this process has been capped. It will cause serious delays for Australians wanting to access potentially life-saving or life-changing new medicines. Will your government commit to immediately removing this cap?
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I think this is thank you, and I thank Senator Kovacic for the question. I think this is the issue that we dealt with in estimates in quite considerable detail in terms of the management of what has been a very significant increase in applications for PBAC approval. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I recall from estimates it was a very significant increase that couldn't be dealt with at one meeting. And so the decision of the minister was to call for an extra meeting so that all of those applications could be considered in detail, and that those were triaged in accordance with, as I understand it, an assessment of against an assessment of criteria to make sure that those decisions could be dealt with as quickly as possible. It is simply, and I think we went into it in detail, there are simply the workforce to provide some of those assessments isn't as big as we need it to be, and so quite a lot of work has been done by the Department of Health to go out and to try and find extra assessors to provide information for that. So everything that can be being done is being done to make sure those PBAC meetings, the one that's being held next month or in March, and the extra one, are being dealt with as quickly as possible. So I reject the insinuation that there has been some sense of control put on it. It's about managing the appropriate safety and regulatory responsibilities to ensure that those applications are processed as quickly as possible. It is highly unusual to have this number come forward, much more than any other standard meeting, and that's why these extra measures have been put in place.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Kovacic, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. In Senate estimates, you said we need to accept the reality that there is only so much that one PBAC meeting can do. Can you please clarify what you think Australian patients who are waiting for access to life-saving medicines and treatments should accept your government's cap on potential new PBS medicines?
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. Minister Gallagher.
Again, I reject the use of the word cap. There have been double the number of applications come in for assessment through PBAC. We have a system in place that manages how those submissions are dealt with. If you were in government right now, it would be exactly the same for you. So the fact that you are politicising the safety and regulatory assessments of medicines in this country is outrageous. We have a certain amount that can be dealt with at the March meeting, and so the minister has asked PBAC, has directed PBAC to hold an additional meeting.
Minister, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
Senator Ruston's been called numerous times and she has ignored your request.
Senator Ruston, it's not a matter of whether your comments are acceptable or unacceptable. They are rude and disorderly and disrespectful. And I've asked you several times to be quiet when a minister is answering the question. So I'm going to request that you do that, or your choice is to leave the chamber. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
So the fact that this is going to be used politically, it seems, is a real shame, because the real issue here is that there isn't enough independent assessors to do the work to deliver all of those submissions in the 3-day meeting in March, and so an extra one has been called for May so that things can be managed as quickly as possible.
Minister. Senator Kovacic, second supplementary.
When last in government, Labor took the unprecedented step of deferring the listing of new medicines on the PBS because it couldn't manage the budget. Health Minister at the time, Nicola Roxon, said that Labor can't in every instance guarantee that a drug will be listed immediately because there are financial consequences for doing that. Minister, Labor promised to list all PBAC-recommended medicines on the PBS. Has your government implemented the new PBS cap because you are worried about the financial consequences of delivering on this promise?
Thank you, Senator Kovacic. Minister Gallagher.
I'll repeat again that there is no cap. We are managing unprecedented submissions coming to PBAC, and we need to make sure those medicines are safe and ready to use. It is done in March and May. But
Senator
for those opposite that have voted against cheaper medicines in this chamber to then come in here and point the finger at us on medicines, we have done more in 2.5 years to bring down the price of medicines, to make sure medicines are more affordable, to make sure that people who are on long-term medications can get double the amount of medications for the price of 1 month for 2, and we have listed from the 1st of July 2022 to the 1st of November 2024, the government has committed additional funding for 265 new and amended PBS listings. A further 476 items were also approved where the budget funding is already provided, and further 22 price changes. We are doing everything we can to make more medicines available.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.